If you've all been good little girls and boys, maybe they'll let us on. All right, let's see what happens. It's always a crapshoot. Let's see what happens. Oh, we're on. First thing up, you've all been little girl. Nice. All right, let's get this. Let's record this. Record to the cloud. All right. I think we're up. I think we got everything going. Adam's here. We're here. Everybody's here. It must be Whiskey Wednesday. The great deluge is going on outside, but like I always say, the weather is always great in the liquor store. And here we are today. Today is something a little bit different, and I wanted you all to come tonight because this, I think, is the start of something great. I also think this is sort of trailblazing for the U.S. market. And Adam, and I don't want to get it wrong, but it's Polonski. I knew I was going to get it wrong, but anyways, he's here tonight, and he is the co-founder, nor is the real brains behind the outfit. But anyways, she's not here tonight. Is behind this new. I want to say an independent bottler.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's what it is. A Lost Lantern. And I brought Adam in tonight so he could sort of explain what they actually do. First of all, what'd you come up with the name, Lost Lantern?
Well, the idea for it is that we want to shine a light on whiskeys that would otherwise not be discovered. So we'll get into it more, but everything we do is fully transparent about its origin. We're often working with small distilleries or places that only have regional distribution around the country. So
just
this is
just a little bit, just so bit. Yeah, there you go.
How's that?
Yeah, it's great.
Better. Okay, cool. And this is a way to help people discover them. And we thought it was a memorable name. And if we had gone in the Scottish tradition for naming independent bottlers, we'd be called Ganley Roper and Polonski, and nobody would buy that.
No. Nora came up with that, right?
No, that was me.
Oh, well,
she is the brains behind.
Well, wait a minute. Adam won. He got one. All right. Listen, I'm going to tell him. Listen, when it's your turn, it's your turn.
And if she wins, I'll tell her to watch this later. But if I win,
that's right. That's right. She's going to watch it later, anyways, just to see if you did okay. I think she's going to check up on you. You guys came to me when you were just sort of like, this was sort of like you were really thinking about it as sort of like a brainchild. You were sort of like messing around with it. And it was we had a thing. What do you think? This was their question to me. What do you think?
Yeah.
And I go, time for an American independent bottler. I think that's a great idea. You're going to hit, I think we went over some of the bumps in the road that you would probably hit.
Yeah. Some of which ended up being easier than you thought. Some of which were harder, but
yeah,
I feel like I think I've known you for probably like 8 or 9 years now. Since back when I was a journalist. I got started for writing for Whiskey Advocate magazine. That's how I got into the industry. Was reviewing American whiskeys from around the country, and was also writing for one of the company's trade magazines, which is called Market Watch. It's for spirits retailers, and I would always call him because he would tell me what he thought about something, and that was
most of it was bad.
Yeah, it was mostly bad. That's why I went to you.
Yeah.
If everyone else was like, this thing is great, flavored vodka is the most incredible thing I've ever tried, you'd be like, whipped cream vodka is not good.
Yeah. Well, Randall and I proved that time and time again. Do you remember Odka?
I don't remember.
Oh, thank God. Wasabi flavored and cut grass and electricity vodka.
What?
Randall described it quite aptly as, when you lick a battery. I go, no, Randall, I don't know what a lick a battery. I don't really want to find out. But if this is just like that, I definitely don't want to find out. So yes, I can see where that goes.
It's important to have relatable tasting notes.
It is very important. And yes, it is. And then we have some mutual friends.
Yeah.
In the writing industry and stuff like that.
There are only like 20 full-time whiskey journalists. So I think both of us know all of them basically.
I think we do. Well, and you are right. I look, we're, a lot of times we're here doing stuff. We're dealing with the public. We sort of see where people are going. And I think that does give us a different insight than a lot of other people that are sitting in an ivory tower. Yeah. And especially marketing people coming up with something and then they have to relate it to the real world and it doesn't quite translate.
Yeah, it's very easy for someone who works for a brand to say, XYZ is the hot new thing and everyone loves it and it's going to be a cool thing for years. But you actually see what people are drinking and buying and excited about and come back for again. And that's a different experience than you would get from someone else.
And this is, I think, one of the things, if I remember correctly, one of the things I think I said is like, look, you can get anybody to buy something once. And in your case, you said, good, because some of these, they're only going to get to buy once.
Right.
Anyways, I said, yes, but it still has to be good because you want that transparency that you're going for and in the fact that you're making stuff that's of high quality. You're coming out with things that are of quality.
Yeah.
But sort of explain a little bit of what you guys actually do. What is it? I think a lot of these people out here know what an independent bottler does in Scotland, and it is similar. But I think you go a little bit of a step further in some of your products.
Yeah. Well, just for curiosity, for show of hands, how many of you are very familiar with Scotch independent bottlers? Okay, cool. So there's a mix. So really I guess a good way to start is with the vision that we had for this in the first place, which was we fell in love with Scotch independent bottlers, which buy whiskey from distilleries all around Scotland. They put it out with full transparency where it comes from, sometimes on its own, sometimes blending it. And at the same time, we were falling in love with new American whiskeys from all across the country, from newer distilleries, and saying some of these places are really good at a time when other people were saying like these craft whiskeys have potential and maybe will be good someday. And it gotten to the point where there were things that were good right now, and a lot of people didn't know that yet. They had been turned off by brands in the past or just were sticking with what they already knew. And we realized that the independent bottler model was a great way to highlight these smaller distilleries. We never are going to have a distillery of our own. We don't want one. It's not like we're buying.
Trust me, you don't want.
We really don't. We're not buying whiskey until our own whiskey is ready or something like that, like some brands do. For us, the way we add value is helping people discover whiskey and distilleries that they might not know about otherwise. And sometimes that's by putting out whiskey that just comes from one distillery and saying, here's this whiskey from this distillery, and this is their story and why they're great. And sometimes, like the whiskeys that are in blue here, it's a blend of whiskeys from multiple distilleries that say something about American whiskey as a whole that is different than what you can do if you're mostly playing with just your own whiskey or just for whiskey from the usual couple of places.
Yeah. What's that? It is, but it is, but it isn't. And I think what I want you to do is, because I think we got all the colors up here. We're missing green.
No, we don't have any of the greens up
green,
here,
right? But just explain like the color. So when you're dealing with Lost Lantern, I do love the transparency, and there is sort of like color coding.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, because since we have most of the colors up here, but can you just go through quickly and say like what each color means?
Yeah. So all whiskeys that are in blue are a multi-distillery blend. So all of them say exactly what distilleries they come from and what style of whiskey it is. So even for that, it's fully transparent. It's right on the front label. It's not like
not hidden.
On
you don't have to go right. You don't have to go find it.
Yeah. The brown is American single malt. Red is bourbon. Green, which we don't have here, is rye from a single distillery. We'll taste a blend of ryes, but not one, just from one place. Cream colored is for unusual or weird things like a corn whiskey that doesn't taste like a corn whiskey.
Right.
And then gold means expensive.
You got to know. Listen, you know what you're getting by looking at, like, once you know the code, right? It's all about breaking codes. Once you look at the code, once you know the codes and you're doing it, you can just look at the shelf and go, oh, all right, that's going to interest me. Oh, maybe not. Well, wait a minute. And that's great just by looking at it. Then you can, I mean, you really do break down everything that's being done here. And I like the fact now you really haven't done, like, you put blends together, and we're going to get into that today too. Are you buying any like new make and aging it on your own?
We're not buying new make. We actually thought early on.
Okay, that's why I want to ask, because independent bottle, a lot of them do that, right?
Yeah, they do a lot of that in Scotland. And when we first thought of the idea for the company, it started out with Nora and I. She's both my wife and my co-founder. She comes from the boss, and comes from a background in spirits retail at a well-known store in New York City that shall not be named, but a well-regarded whiskey retailer there, and also has a background in startups and business and all the things that as a journalist I don't know how to do. So she runs everything. But we were complaining that there was no independent bottler for American whiskey. We were like, there are a lot of places that are sourcing whiskey. That's cool. That's totally fine. Yep. And then that, especially back then, 2015, 2016, a lot of places were not transparent that they were sourcing at all. Not just saying that like not like buried in small print on the back, distilled in Indiana. They might not even have that, which they legally were supposed to.
Right.
And we're just like, why do you need to do this? Why not just say where you got your whiskey from? And after complaining about this for like 2 years and talking how there should be an American independent bottler, we've ultimately decided, I'm a journalist. I know a lot of the distilleries already. Nora has a business background. We can actually do this ourselves. And someone at some point is going to do it. And we want to do it the right way, like a Scotch independent bottler, where like everything that you want to know that we can tell you, we will tell you.
Okay. I like it. I like it a lot.
And
all right.
For us, one other thing I would add is we think of ourselves as a little bit different from a place like Compass Box, which we love. And we think of them as a blending house, where for them, they're working with whiskeys from all across whatever country they're working with, usually Scotland, and creating the best whiskey that they possibly can with those whiskeys. And then they're talking about the blenders art and their skill in that. Whereas, and you can find out the sources, but that's not really the point of it. It's not like that this came from
the magic is putting it all together.
Whereas for us, even for the multiple distillery blends, where it came from is the point. So I think for us, it's both are really valid models and are fully transparent. But for us, it's more about like, here's where it came from and why we picked those places,
right?
Rather than this is a greater than the sum of its parts. And
how was your reception? Because you just did Whiskey Roadshow here. How was everybody? You know, we haven't get really a chance to sit down and talk about that.
Yeah, it was good. We had a fun time. I recognized some of you. I think you came to my table, which was fun.
You never left the table. That was even fun.
It was good because this is a crowd of people who get it and get what we're doing. And even if some of you know the distilleries that we're working with, which some of you do, we're doing something that's a little different than what they put out on their own in most cases. That this is a side of their whiskey that you wouldn't ever get otherwise. And that's really what we love about Scotch independent bottlers, that you can get an unpeated whiskey from a place that usually only makes peated whiskey, or something that was aged in refill casks for like 20 years and somehow is pretty cheap. And
well, you know, the other part for you too is being a writer. I mean, you have to educate. I mean, what you're doing is a complete, although, you know, more popular overseas, is really a new concept here. So you're not only selling your product, but you're also educating people on what it is.
Exactly.
At the same time. And that's not a easy task.
No. And I think that was one of the things you warned us about early on, is like, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do. And that has definitely been the case, but people have been really receptive to it.
That's great.
The transparency, and distilleries have been really receptive to it too. And when we decided we ultimately were going to do this business, we started with we were tired of living in New York City. We put everything in storage, went on an 8-month road trip around the country to visit distilleries and talk to them about the vision for this and pitch them on the idea for an American independent bottler. And we pretty quickly decided that we would only work with distilleries that we had visited in person, which is still true.
That's a good idea.
And for them, that helped get a lot of buy-in from the distilleries, even the places that we already knew. Like, it's easy as a journalist to call someone up from New York and say, like, what's going on in Waco, Texas? Tell us about how things are down at Balcones. It's different to go down there all the time.
Right.
And really see for yourself how they're making things. Like, when you've been to Scotland a million times, you know, it's very different when you've been to a distillery versus when you haven't, as terms of your understanding what they're doing and why their whiskey tastes the way it does. And we want to share the story of why the places we work with make whiskey the way they do. And that means we need to understand it and be able to tell that story ourselves.
Go ahead, Lisa. Make it easier for you. Would that make it easier for you to blend? That's what Lisa's asking. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely makes it easier to blend when we really understand the flavor profiles and how they work together. And when we talk about the rye, the idea for that came out of some of our travels, and all the whiskeys in that came from one region of the country, which is the Midwest. And that came because we saw from traveling that there are certain commonalities among all those whiskeys that are not necessarily obvious at first, but they play really well together. And the other thing that we learned on our road trip, to answer your original question, is that we thought we would have to buy new make and wait and age it for a long time. And we found that we were at a spot where a lot of distilleries did have a little bit of whiskey that they could spare that was already aged.
Right.
And we quickly decided that's what we want, because we're based in Vermont, but we're working with whiskey from all over the country. And if you're tasting it, we want it to taste like where it came from. We don't want to buy a new make Texas whiskey, move it to Vermont, and in 5 years, and it tastes like Vermont whiskey.
That's right.
Which is like nothing. And we wanted to showcase a sense of place. And I know we have mutual friends who hate the idea of a sense of place in whiskey, but I am not one of them.
Provence.
Yes.
Provence is the correct word, my friend Adam.
Yes.
Provence. All right, so let's. They're gonna get antsy if we don't start drinking. I see some of them already giving me the evil eye.
Let's do it.
So yeah, let's do it. Let's start. All right. So the first one that we're gonna do is I think this was like, first of all, this was brilliant. I love this, and most of all because you use the term that I love, which is vatted, because it tells you exactly what it is. All right. So this is a vatted American single malt, correct?
Yeah. So this is American Vatted
Number
malt.
one on your
number
chart.
one is a blend of American single malts. It is one of the first blends of American single malts ever made. In Scotland, the term for these now is a blended malt. Before 2009, the term was exactly this. It was a vatted malt. And they changed it because it was confusing, and then they changed it to blended malt, which is also confusing.
Which is more confusing, I think. Because you keep using blended for two things.
Right.
Using blended meaning grain and single malt together. That's a blended Scotch whiskey. Or you use the term blended malt whiskey. And this the second word that defines the first word, where vatted just goes, oh, I get it. Yeah. It's all single malts.
Yes, and that's exactly what it means. It's a blend of whiskey from multiple distilleries, and all of those whiskeys are single malts, 100% malted barley. So these are all American single malts. They're from 6 distilleries, and this whiskey we made in a unique way we didn't do with any other whiskey that we've done, which is we created this on our road trip after we kept visiting distilleries, especially single malt distilleries, and hearing them say it would be really fun to play with blending other people's whiskey, but we've never gotten a chance to do that. And after I heard that for the 4th time, I realized that we as an independent
you're the conduit.
Yeah, we are the conduit for that. It would make no sense for another brand to do that and release it on their own with someone else's whiskey. But for us as an independent bottler, we could do that. We could bring people together. And we did exactly that. We brought the distillers and blenders from all the distilleries in this blend together into a room for a marathon day of blending and many days of
shut the door and locked it
before and after, pretty much. And they brought barrels that they thought reflected their whiskey at its best at that time. And it worked really well because we got all of their buy-in at once. This is before we had launched anything. So we were kind of still on the stage of like, how do we get people to sell us whiskey and let us put their name on it? And it got their buy-in, and it got them to bring really good barrels because they were showing off for their peers. So the whiskeys in this and the people who were in the room from the distilleries are Balcones Distilling in Waco, Texas, Copperworks in Washington, which is a small regional distillery up there, Westward in Oregon, which is a little more familiar out here probably, Santa Fe Spirits in New Mexico, which makes mesquite smoked single malt.
Okay.
Virginia Distillery Company in Virginia.
They're very familiar with that.
Yeah.
We've been working with them since they started too.
Yeah. And 888, also known as the Notch on Nantucket here in Massachusetts, which makes the oldest American single malt in the country. I think makes great whiskey, but it's often not widely available even here in most of Massachusetts, mostly on the island. So we said, you come down, bring some of your old whiskey, and we'll play around with it. And we had 2 final blends. Okay. This is the one we ultimately chose. The other one tasted a lot like a Scotch. It was almost all used oak, used cooperage. This had a little bit of used and new cooperage. It had a little bit of mesquite smoked malt in it too. Because we wanted to show the style of American single malt, not like what does it look like if America is trying to make Scotch, but what does this new emerging style of American whiskey taste like? So this is 105 proof. Everything else we do is basically cask strength. This we slow proofed for 4 months at Virginia Distillery Company, actually. To help the flavors integrate together. It has a little bit of mesquite smoke. It has a little bit of peat in it. Other than that, I'm not inclined to give tasting notes because you all know what you're doing.
So, first of all, kudos to you to put that many distilleries together in one room. Because, I've always found like a lot of times when you bring a lot of great whiskeys together, it's very difficult to blend them because you want those missing pieces for other things to fit in. And the fact that they came out with 2 blends, even one that tastes like Scotch and one that really sort of gets more of the character, is an achievement on its own, I think.
Yeah, and it's really true that the whiskeys that work well for blends are not necessarily the whiskeys that work well as single casks, and often they're not at all. There were some of the whiskeys that people brought, we screened them beforehand, and we pulled a few of them out. And we were like, no, we're not using that for the blend. It won't play well with others, and we want to put it out as a single cask instead. Some whiskeys play.
Wow,
better.
you get to you. It's devious, man. I love it because you actually picked some single barrels that you wanted to do, and they brought them to you.
Exactly.
Man, you're like an evil genius. I love it.
Well,
I love it. I love it.
Well,
What do you guys think? Pretty cool, right? You know, and the thing is that even tasting this, it still fits in the genre.
Mhm.
It really, you know, I mean, the flavor profiles are really good. Yeah.
And this label, you'll notice looks a little different than the others. It's our original label. We did a refresh a little while ago, but this is our flagship original product. We saved a little bit of it. We just launched in Massachusetts very recently, so we wanted to bring that out here too, because this, in some ways, really shows what we're trying to do as an independent bottler of push the boundaries. We really think that blending is the future of American whiskey. And the name American Vatted Malt also is a nod to people who know Scotch really well and have for a long time. That
And love the word vatted because I know you do.
is that the only reason you brought it in? Because it has
Yes, it
Vatted
did.
Malt
Yeah,
in
is
it?
that there, you've guessed my the
Your-
reasoning
your
behind it.
evil ways.
And my evil ways. Well, you're evil, so I'm evil, so that's okay. I do really like that though, because it so explains things.
Yeah.
I like that one. That's nice. So is there like an average age on this? Not that we're ageist. It tastes great, so it doesn't really matter. But is there sort of
It
did you
has
sort of figure out like sort of what it is?
the actual age statement is pretty low. It's only 2 years.
Yeah.
But most of it is around 4 to 5.
Okay.
And maybe 3 to 4. 2 to 7, I think, was the full range. All the barrel details are on our website. They didn't fit on the label.
Yeah, I don't think I could get that one on there.
Yeah.
Was anybody? I got to ask this question because you get 5 people in a room like this that are all, you know, they're all distillers, so they're all going to have somewhat of a ego or maybe even a pecking order. Was there no fist fights?
There were no fist fights, but we
Did
did
we
not.
get heated?
We didn't breathe a word of this to anyone outside of the people who were involved
Yeah.
until after it was over.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know if it was going to work. We didn't,
Exactly.
I didn't know if it was going to end up with somebody getting punched in the face or knocked over.
Yeah.
But everyone took it incredibly seriously. Like
No,
Christian
yeah.
Krogstad from Westward flew in for that day just to do this. Didn't even
Nice.
charge us for it, which was
Nice.
nice because you're a brand new company. Had
Yeah.
money.
And that gets reflected when you
Yeah.
put stuff out too. So that's great.
And Jared Himstep from Balcones, who's the head distiller there, didn't eat anything the entire day because he didn't want to mess up his palate. Like he
Yep.
took it extremely seriously. And at the end of the day, it was like, why does Jared look like he's going to fall over?
Because he is.
Yeah.
Because he is. But I think this came out really cool. I love the flavor profile. It's really great.
Thank you.
Nice job. Well, you didn't do anything on this one, actually.
Oh, we were in the
And I'm
back,
just
too.
teasing you. I'm just teasing you. I'm just
This
teasing.
interview is over.
Okay, yes. I've heard that before. I don't know where, but somewhere I heard that before. All right, so what's the next one we're going to look at?
The next one is,
Well, speaking of Jared, right?
yeah, speaking of Jared, is called Gentle Giant. This is part of what we call our single distillery series. The first one is our blend series. This is a whiskey that comes from one single distillery, but it is not a single cask. It is a blend of multiple casks from that distillery. And when we do that, we give it a name, an alliterative name that reflects something about that whiskey. And in this case, it's Gentle Giant, because I think there's often a stereotype about Texas whiskey. This comes from Balcones Distilling.
Yep.
And the stereotype of Texas whiskey
It's still there.
is that
You can taste it. It's good.
yeah, is Texas whiskeys are often seen as being really oaky and over the top and super high proof and powerful. And sometimes it can be like that. And some of those whiskeys are great. But there's a different side of Texas whiskey. Texas is more than one thing. Even
Right.
the individual distilleries are more than one thing. And we think Balcones is one of the best distilleries in the country, not one of the best new distilleries, just one of the best distilleries in the country. Makes a tremendous variety of whiskey, and a large majority of it doesn't really get beyond Texas.
Right.
Or a few select places, like you probably get some of it,
Yeah.
but it's not widely known.
No.
And so this whiskey, we played primarily with their used oak aged casks, and wanted to put together something that showed a more elegant and lighter side of Texas whiskey.
Well, you know what's really cool about this one? It's really balanced.
We went down to Balcones to make this. We visited them a number of times. We plugged into their blending lab and their process.
Yep.
We came down and they had more than 100 samples ready for us to play with. Nora and I do all the blending.
Yep.
And they just said, have fun. Go taste through things and let us know when you're ready to talk further.
See ya.
And about, I think, 6 or 8 hours later, we're like, okay, we've got some ideas now. And
Now you left this at blending strength.
this is actually not cask strength. This is at 57.6% ABV.
So you brought it down to that?
We proofed it down from cask
Yeah.
strength, which was 57.9% ABV.
Oh, well, there you go.
So you lost 0.3% ABV.
Well, there you go. Wherever it tastes the best is
Yeah.
where it's at.
And that's what it was.
Yeah.
Is that when we did the final blend at cask strength, it was a little bit spiky.
Better bring it down just
And
a little bit.
the Balcones team, we asked them, like, why is this a little different than it was before? And they said, we don't know, but if it were us, we would add like a couple of gallons of water, literally just a few gallons to the blending tank, and that will make it softer. And that's exactly what it did. And this is predominantly used oak and with single malt that was full term maturation in ex apple brandy casks.
Nice.
So there's a little bit of fruitiness to it that I saw some nods with that. People are always like, there's a fruitiness and I don't know where it comes from.
The thing about this though too is it's still Texas big, but it's balanced, and I think that's the big difference, and that's why I think you're aptly named it. Because it is still a big whiskey, but it's not by any means overpowering.
Yeah, and I think it truly is a Texas take on a Scotch whiskey, which does not mean that it tastes like Scotch exactly, because it does taste like Texas, but it is heavily influenced and inspired by that. And we were incredibly excited by this because we don't enter whiskeys into competitions very often, but we did for this one. And it ended up winning Best American Single Malt at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, beating out Balcones, which also entered the competition.
That's it. You're never doing it again.
And the cool thing about it is that Jared, the head distiller, absolutely loved that. He said that, like, in Scotland, independent bottlers beat out the distilleries for awards all the time, and that it just shows someone else's perspective on your whiskey. They live it every day. We plugged into their blending lab for like a week and then moved on. And he thought it was a sign of the industry maturing. And they've always been one of our flagship partners. He was the first major distillery to say yes to us because he loves independent bottlers. We knew he would be on board with it. He knew us already. And it's been a real privilege to be able to work with them.
That's nice. They're nice people down there too. What do you guys think? Like that one? Now this one, just so you guys know, this just came in. We just got this.
Yeah, like this week, I think.
Like yesterday.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that a little bit too. And I'm glad we got it because I think this is really nice. This is one that wasn't originally on the docket for tonight.
Well, you're already down one bottle because I hadn't brought enough, so I didn't more. So
there you go.
But we have more of it.
What do you think? Yeah. How do you see the your relationship with Balcones with the buyout by Diageo?
Well, I don't want to speak too much for them, but my impression is generally that they're very pleased with how things are going, and it's a big company, so things sometimes move a little slowly. But my impression is that Diageo bought them to let them do what they do best.
Yeah, a lot of times people like that. There's a reason they bought them.
Yeah,
a reason they're looking at them and doing stuff. And the smarter companies will just go, okay, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, right.
And
exactly.
Trying to get, don't trip it up. It's working.
Yeah.
Until we have to, mess with it, don't mess with it. Right. Yeah. So.
And we definitely expect to continue to work with them. There was a
great.
little bit of questions about it at first. Like even they didn't know. They're like, I don't know. We don't know what we can do. We just got bought by a big company and what's going on. But now that the dust is settled, we're continuing to work with them.
No, that's great. Yeah. They're nice people down there, and they've been up here a couple times too. Yeah. We've done some stuff with them. Like it? Okay. Very different than the first one though, right? I mean, this is one of the things that these guys can do is like every expression can be different. Not at all what you expected. And I think that's what you were going for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the fun. Texas whiskey is more than one thing, just like Iowa Scotch is more than one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yep. Yes, Jared was here for our single malt symposium.
Nice.
And we did. No, which was cool. I thought that might have come to blows. That was actually really good. What is American single malt? Well, we're not going to answer it here today because we've had the experts come in and try to answer it, and that was not.
Was that the one back in like 2019?
Yeah. We had Lou here. We had Lou was here, and we had quite a few people here.
Someone from Westland.
Well, we had Matt. Matt was here from Westland at the time, and I think we had Virginia here, and then I think didn't we have Mike from down at in Rhode Island? He was here too. Yeah. So it was really good. It was really interesting. Robin Robinson was here.
Well, and
he was just yelling at everybody.
We came too, just as guests, drove down from Vermont just to check it out because all of our buddies were here.
Right.
And then I think someone from Westland spotted us and then made us like basically do this, like tell everyone what we were doing with Lost Lantern. We hadn't launched anything yet. It was
That's right.
pre-pandemic. It was kind of our first time in the public eye was right in this room.
Great. Let's come back to your roots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, number three.
Number three.
So now we're going to get into like a little bit of a series, right? Is what this is sort of hinting at?
Yeah. So now we're moving out of malt world into bourbon and rye world.
Okay.
We do all styles of American whiskey. We don't discriminate as long as
we drink everything.
Like
yeah. They know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah. So this is Flung Rye. It is our flagship rye whiskey. This is edition number 1. And our Flung series, we do first the rye and then the bourbon, are blends of rye or bourbon from multiple distilleries that showcase something about American whiskey.
Okay.
And Flung Rye is a blend of ryes from across the Midwest. It's our first ever regional blend. This is not out of hometown loyalty. I'm not from the Midwest, nor is not from the Midwest, and Vermont is not in the Midwest. But
are you sure?
Pretty sure.
Pretty sure. Okay. I'm just checking.
Yeah, I think the Canadians think so.
Way south for them.
But we saw that the ryes from the Midwest really had a unique character that we weren't seeing from anywhere else in the country. They're a little lighter, a little less spicy and oak forward than Kentucky ryes. They tend to have a little bit of a toasty flavor, and more than anything else, they have a creaminess on the palate. And we saw this across multiple distilleries, and then wanted to showcase that and start to make a statement and say, like, this is Midwest. The Midwest is a definitive whiskey region, or is emerging as one. It's in its early days, but it has its own style.
Why do you think that? Do you have any like insight you think why that is?
I think it's because I think the biggest thing is it's not quite as hot as Kentucky. It's a little cooler. It's a little less humid. I think that they're not doing the standard Kentucky mash bill for rye, where it's like 51% rye, and then so they're like very low on the rye, or the 95.5 rye either. It's kind of more in the middle. So this is a blend of whiskey from 5 distilleries in 4 states. Has Tom's Foolery, which is a small distillery in Ohio that you probably know and probably nobody else does. Middle West in Ohio, which is now one of the largest craft distilleries in the country. They make a pumpernickel rye.
We have it. We've had it here.
Nice. It's very good, and I love it. I feel like it's understated, but it grows on you quickly. Cedar Ridge Distillery in Iowa, one of our favorite distilleries, one of our core partners, and Starlight in Indiana. So this has Indiana whiskey in it, but it is not MGP. It is Starlight, and Wollersheim in Wisconsin. And again, I don't expect you to remember all that, and you don't have to, because they're all
on the label.
Yeah.
I've had this discussion, and I think I've had it. I haven't had it with you, but I've had this discussion about the whole blurring of the line between rye and bourbon, where we're getting too close to the 50-50 mark.
Yeah. Where
it's just like the corn might be 51, and we're getting ryes that are in like 30s. And then we're getting, ryes that are 51 rye, and then the corn is in the 40s. Yeah. And you start getting that. The line was like, there has been some whiskeys that I'd be tough to tell if I was drinking rye or bourbon, because it's scattered that line. So on that line, so fine that it's becoming homogenous.
Yeah, absolutely. And we wanted to showcase a rye that tasted like rye, that had the herbal and grassy flavor that I really love from rye. And like I like some of those whiskeys that you're talking about, but like sometimes you want to.
No, that's right. Yeah. No, yeah, and you get a little bit of that, like that sort of like it's like a light mint on the nose, right? Did you guys get that? It wasn't a little light for you. For me, it was a little bit light. I mean, it was like, it's not a real strong mint. It's like you're by the field a bit, not rolling in it like you usually do, Matt. I'm not. Right. That's really nice too. I like that. That's really cool.
And this was probably the blend that took us the longest to put together. We have our own production space in Vermont now. If any of you are ever up there, we're about half an hour south of Burlington in Virgins, and would love to welcome you there and do a tasting.
Next time I go up for the Sugar Shack, I may stop by.
Yeah. We'll let you taste cool secret things, but not any of these, because you can buy these here. But you'll taste other things there. But we worked in this blend for a really long time with whiskey that we already had in-house that we've been buying for a while for this project. And it just wasn't getting to quite where we wanted. We could get it to like 90% of where we wanted, but it wasn't quite there. And then we played with grabbing one of our single casks that we previously released of the Cedar Ridge malted rye, and put a little bit of that into the blend just to play with it. And we said, that's what's missing. That's what we
There it
need
is. That structure of
is-
malted rye.
But we didn't have any Cedar Ridge malted rye except for the single
Oh.
barrel we'd already released. So I had to call up the head distiller there. This is probably like a little later than this last year. It was like December 21st or something. I was like, how can we get a barrel of malted rye by January 15th? And that was, he figured it out. He made it happen. He sent
Nice.
samples within a day, and we said, yep, that's exactly what we need. We used half of the barrel for this blend, and we thought it brought it all together really nicely.
Nice.
And we like that.
And now you have some tucked away if you need it.
That's
right?
true.
That's
Yeah.
true. I like it.
I love malted rye. It's
Yeah, I like malted rye too. You're actually, there's quite a few people in this audience right here that love malted rye.
Yeah. Well, we don't have one tonight, but my other new favorite that I've only seen a couple times, but I really love is malted wheat whiskey. We've done 100% malted wheat whiskeys from 2 different distilleries, and they're both spectacular and have the best aspects of a wheated bourbon.
Right around the corner, the Bully Boy is making their bourbon, wheated bourbon, and they're using malted wheat
Nice.
for that. So it's gaining some popularity,
Yeah.
which is nice. I like that one.
Yeah. So the next edition of Far Flung Rye will not be a regional blend. This was the Midwest one. Everyone will be a
Okay.
little bit different, be a different set of distilleries. So
Yep.
with these, they'll generally always be available, but it'll be something different every time, different mix of
Right.
distilleries, different
It'll be
stories.
called Far Flung, but it'll be different makeup.
Yeah, which is why Far Flung Bourbon 2 has the 2 right on the front label, front
Right.
and center, which is,
So you need to go look at what it is.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So Far Flung Bourbon is not a regional blend either. This is a little simpler. It's just our way of showing that great bourbon now comes from all across the United States.
I like that one.
Great bourbon, of course, comes from Kentucky and Tennessee and Indiana, and the places that we're used to. But it also comes from other places that make whiskey that's different than what you would expect, that tastes different than Kentucky bourbon tastes. And that's what's exciting to us. We didn't want to make a whiskey that tasted like a usual Bardstown, MGP, whatever, Tennessee blend.
Right.
Those are great. People already do an amazing job with them.
Mhm.
There's nothing we can add there. But we can play with blending sources that no one else is working with. So this also has bourbon from Starlight Distillery in Indiana. It has some from Kings County in Brooklyn, Smooth Ambler in West Virginia, which is best known for their Old Scout brand, but also makes their own West Virginia bourbon, and that's what we used for this.
Okay.
Wallersheim in Wisconsin, and a place called Rich Grain Distilling in Mississippi, which is a closed distillery that went out of business in Mississippi. So we used a little bit of that
Okay.
as part of the blend. Every batch of this really just showcases the best of the whiskeys that we've seen recently and are showcasing. And the flavor profile will always vary a little bit. So this is,
I like that one
half
too. I
strength.
love the finish on that one.
This is 126 proof.
Okay. Nice.
Yep.
Mouth feels really nice on it.
Thank you.
That's nice. I like that. All right. We are down to number 5, which is a little bit different, right?
Yeah, number 5 is a little bit different. We're still in bourbon world.
I shouldn't say that. It's a little bit different. They're all different.
Yep.
And that's the whole point.
I mean, you're correct.
I am correct. But thank you. I was putting number 6 there.
Number 6. Oh goodness.
Now we're
A secret.
gonna do one more. Yeah, we're gonna do one more.
So number 5 is called Soaring Spice.
Soaring Spice. Yeah.
This is part of our single distillery series again, which means multiple barrels from one distillery. In this case, it comes from Frey Ranch Distillery in Fallon, Nevada. How many of you all know Frey Ranch already? Cool.
That's a high number because not a lot of Frey Ranch comes out this way. And somebody asked me the other day, said, I'm trying to get my hands on Frey Ranch. I'm like, I know where you can get, if you want to try some Frey Ranch, I know where you can try it.
Yeah.
It's under Lost Land. What's that? Tafford tasting. Yeah, believe it or not. I know where you can get it because that's one of John Tafford was saying how much he liked that whiskey.
Oh, interesting.
And people are like, oh, where can I get that? I go, well, there's only one place you can get it right now.
Exactly.
And by the way, it's a very good example of it.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we did this whiskey with them. Because for those of you who don't know them, they are one of the country's only true estate distilleries. They grow 100% of their grain themselves on their family farm. The Frey family has been in Nevada for more than 150 years.
Guys, bring it down a little bit.
Since the 1850s, before Nevada was a state, and started distilling about 15 years ago. and use their 2,000 or so acres of land for all of their grain. They even malt their barley on site with a
Really?
weird thing. They've like it's like it's not like a full floor malting apparatus. They've like built like a custom drum.
Really?
And,
Oh, that's cool.
and
I'd
the
like
way
to see
that in the way that only farmers in very, very rural, out of the way places can do, where they're just like, we need a machine, so let's just make one.
Right.
And
What does it need to do, and how can we do it?
exactly.
Yeah.
And that means to
Mother
us,
necessity or something like that.
yeah. And this to us is a whiskey that truly reflects a sense of place. The grain for it was grown entirely in one place. It was then distilled there and aged there. This is a 4-year-old 4-grain bourbon in a pretty unique climate. I didn't know you could grow anything in Nevada besides for a gambling addiction. But they're outside of Reno, about an hour east of Reno, in a pretty dry area, but there's a lot of groundwater. And they're in the outer reaches of the Tahoe watershed. So they call it the oasis in Nevada.
Okay.
It's still pretty dry.
It's still pretty dry.
But
enough to grow the grain and get everything done.
Yeah. And this to me does not taste like a Kentucky bourbon. It's not
No.
supposed to taste like a Kentucky bourbon.
It does not.
If you wanted a Kentucky bourbon, if you want something that tastes like a Kentucky bourbon, just buy Kentucky bourbon.
Easy.
But this is something that's a little different.
Right.
It's a Nevada bourbon. It captures that sense of the dryness of the climate. They make a very earthy whiskey.
Yeah.
And we actually called it Soaring Spice because we blended that earthiness down a little bit and blended up some more of the baking spice notes to kind of bridge the gap between their normal bourbon and a Kentucky bourbon. But for us, it's showcasing one of the most unique distilleries in the country and a place that people are really, really excited about on the West Coast, but doesn't make it out here. So
Right.
one of the reasons that they were excited to work with us is it's a way for them to tease things in markets like this
Exactly.
that they're not ready to launch in yet, but this kind of crew has heard of them.
Right.
And this is a way that people
gives everybody access to
Exactly.
it too.
Yeah.
And that has to, I mean, aren't you in a way you are now the promoters of small distilleries everywhere.
Exactly. And
you know,
some of them aren't national yet because they're waiting for their whiskey to age. Some of them don't ever want to be. They're happy to live in their home state.
some of them never going to make enough to do that anyways.
Exactly. And some of them, like Frey Ranch, is never going to make more whiskey than they can make from the grain that they grow on their farm.
Right. So that's going to limit them right there.
Yeah.
All right.
And they may be more widely distributed eventually, but this is a way that they can always get it out there to a different audience and help people who are really excited about their whiskey or excited about new things.
Yeah, and it's a good way to get it, and it's a great example of it too.
Yeah.
So good job. Kudos.
Curious.
Yes. Multiple barrels of Frey Ranch.
Yes, multiple barrels of Frey Ranch. We went out to the ranch about, I forget, maybe 2 years ago to put this together. Came out about a year later, stayed with them for a few days, tasted through a number of barrels, worked with them to create something that showcased what they were up to. Yeah.
Great. That's really nice.
Yeah.
All right. So, here's there's a funny story. We brought everything in. We figured out what we were going to taste, what we were going to do tonight, and the best laid plans of mice and men go awry. And we actually had this whiskey on the shelf, and I sort of knew what it was, and John sort of knew what it was, but we really weren't pushing it. Somebody else knew what it was and bought all of it. A couple bottles went, and then all of a sudden, it all went. And this was an allocated product, anyways. But we thought tonight and talked to Adam, and he was nice enough to make sure we had a bottle of it, so at least you could try it tonight. So, you want to tell us about this one?
Yeah. So this is also part of our single distillery series. This is called Mississippi Memory. Before you taste it, be warned. It is very strong. This is
70%.
Yeah, this is a hazmat bourbon, 70% on the nose, so 140 proof. This comes from a place called Rich Grain Distilling, which, if you've ever heard of before, it was when I mentioned it for Far Flung Bourbon 2 10 minutes ago, because it was a part of that. But this is a distillery that got its start in Mississippi and unfortunately went out of business. They were trying to make a whiskey that truly reflected the Deep South and that unique climate where if the Midwestern ryes are in a place that's cooler than Kentucky and less humid,
Right.
Mississippi, when you're making bourbon there, it's
The exact
extremely
opposite,
hot,
yeah.
extremely humid. I don't know how people can handle it. There's a reason I live in New England. And
Because you wanted a different type of hell.
exactly.
All right.
Yeah, I want sheeting rain as I drive.
Yeah, there
across
you
the
go.
mountain.
Shooting rain as you drive down
Yeah.
from Vermont.
Yeah. Um, Mississippi Memory.
Mississippi Memory. This is 70 proof. This is all from one distillery that is now defunct.
And
So
this is the only distillery that we have not ever visited in person, because by the time we bought it, the distillery was no longer there. He had sold off all the equipment. The owner was pretty much a single person operation. Had sold off the equipment, but kept the barrels and continued to age them in the building that they were in.
that's a real risk. I mean, even keeping the barrels is a real risk, because you're losing angel share like by the score.
Yes, and this is a 5 to 7 year old Mississippi bourbon aged in small barrels. So it's everything else that we tasted was all in 53-gallon barrels or larger. But this was small barrels in a very hot climate. And at some point, I think he realized, was like, I could sell off all this whiskey and get a down payment on a house, and then it will stop evaporating into the air.
Right.
We heard about it. I ended up having to cold call him because I saw his post on some forum a couple months old. And asked him, like, what were you up to? What was the story behind this? Why were you doing this? And why did you close? And eventually got to the point where he sent us samples, and we said, this is different than anything else we've had before. It's very oaky and powerful, and has an intense spice to it, but it's really interesting. We primarily thought we were buying it for blends, but when we got all the barrels in, there were enough that we thought were really distinctive and unique. We wanted to create this whiskey, a blend of multiple barrels, to really show off what Rich Grain Distilling and the founder David Rich were trying to do.
There's two things that usually happen when you have something like this, especially this high of a proof. You're talking 70%, and this much concentration. It becomes a one note. It becomes all wood spice. This is different in the fact that whether you blended a couple barrels together and it went this way, it definitely has depth of character. It is not, even though it does have a lot of that in there, there's other things going on in this whiskey that make it very beautiful, even though it's a hammer.
Yeah, it's an intense whiskey.
It's an intense whiskey, but there's other things going on. It's not one dimensional.
Yeah.
So I think that's like really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can put a few drops of water. That is actually allowed. You should always try it like this. Listen. I don't want to say it, but if you got a bottle of this, I would caution you to drink this as whiskey concentrate, which means that you could get a little bit more than that 750 that's in that bottle out of this, because you should add a little bit water to this, because if we're trying little tiny cups and we're trying samples on it, but if you were actually drinking 2 fingers of this, 2 fingers, you would well, a couple of you with 2 fingers, you would, by the time you got halfway through, your mouth would be anesthetized, and you weren't be tasting all the other things that are going on. By adding a little water to this, you're going to get, try it like it is, but then add a little water to it. You're going to get these depths of flavor that you wouldn't normally get, and I think that's it's really cool, because you usually don't find things that are that high in alcohol that have this like interesting flavor notes.
Yeah, and it's truly a testament, I think, to what this distillery was doing, and it's
Yeah.
a shame that they honestly didn't really exist that long. They, I think, came out with their first whiskey in 2016 or 2017, and by 2020 they were done.
Wow.
And they were the first legal bourbon in Mississippi since Prohibition, coming out in 2016 or 2017.
So where are you storing this now? Do you have it all up in Vermont?
We bought it all and moved it to Vermont.
You have to. I mean, otherwise there would be nothing left.
Well, we actually, the whiskey that was in 15-gallon barrels, some of them, especially the 7-year-old ones, were starting to get to kind of the maximum / outer edge of how tannic you can get. And we ended up rebarreling a lot of them in used bourbon barrels.
Right.
And that's just taken a lot of the sharpness out of it. And it's really made them, the 15s better than some of the 30-gallon barrels now, because the sharpness has gone away. And we're holding on to some of them because we didn't want to release all of them in one go and have this distillery truly be gone forever.
Right.
We feel a real sense of stewardship that David Rich trusted us with these barrels. That, like, he's a nice guy. His business is gone.
Yeah.
He tried to do something special and it didn't work out. But this is a way,
You're
that people can still
historians.
discover it. That now a bunch of 50 people in Massachusetts are trying his whiskey that would
Right.
never have happened otherwise.
Right.
And to us, that in some ways that we felt more responsible for that to make an amazing whiskey out of this, or the best whiskey we possibly could out of the Mississippi bourbon than with anything else, because this is the only chance anyone will ever have to try it.
Right. Historians, historians too, like, which is really cool.
Yeah. And Scotch independent bottlers do this all the time with closed
Right.
distilleries. And
Absolutely.
it's sad that there are probably going to be more closed distilleries in the US in the next few years.
Yep.
And we've always said that we kind of wanted to be there so that we're at least some outlet that we can help people preserve their original vision and tell their story afterwards.
I think that's really great.
And if any of you really love this, even though it's out here, start nagging him, because we do have some barrels of it left, so we could always find a way to make that happen. And
We've already talked. Calm down. We've already talked.
Because there's nothing meaner than saying, "Here's a whiskey you can never try it again."
That's right.
So,
We're already in negotiations. So we'll be looking at that too. And I should mention, by the way, too, that we are on a short list for some of your other limited releases too.
yeah,
We're only going to get some of the stuff. We're only going to get bottles of and stuff like that. But we are on the list. You got to remember they're opening up a new market, which is here in Massachusetts. This is a very difficult thing to do, especially for a small company that's trying to make its way. And we feel very proud to be included in that. And thank you very, very much for doing that. So we'll be getting some of their stuff in. The problem with that, and I just will let you know, is what's great about it sort of gives you about the history and some of the stuff on the back label is when we have such small amounts, we'll do like something like this whenever we can. But in a lot of ways, a lot of that stuff's going to be buying blind. And that's where their commitment to quality plays a key role. And they're going to be, you just tried 6 of their products, and I challenge you to find any one of them lacking. Might like one better than the other. I get it. There's a depth and breadth of different flavor profiles going on here, but each one of these has been quality.
thank you.
And I commend you very much on that.
Yeah. I think that's what we want, is for people to trust that even if it's a distillery you've never heard of before, if it's under the Lost Lantern name, that we've done a lot of vetting of that place. We're not cherry picking barrels. We're not saying like this place, 95% of what they make we don't like, and this one barrel is great. We don't do that. It has to be, this is a place that we want people to discover. If you fall in love with a distillery you've never heard of before through us and then start buying their whiskey, then that's a huge win for us.
We talked about this even earlier today, about the whole point about even with us in like sort of the philosophy with buying single barrels or doing things with distilleries. That's supposed to put a spotlight on the entire distillery portfolio, not just a one-off that you should just buy and forget about everything else they make. And I think you've taken that to the outer limit. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
The whiskeys that are coming in limited amounts, just to go very quickly through them.
Yeah.
We just recently released our fall collection, which is we are calling the 10-year collection. One thing I've heard many, many times over the years is that craft whiskey is always really young, and that is sometimes true. There's a lot of like 2 years in small barrels, and depends what part of the country it's from. But there are places that have really invested in letting their whiskey get a little older, and we wanted to showcase that. Because we're not ageist either. We're happy we've released 11-month-old whiskey from Arizona that we thought was wonderful. But there is something special about someone who's been able to truly sit and wait for a decade or some down the road even longer. So it's 4 single casks, a 10-year-old Ohio bourbon from Tom's Foolery, a 10-year-old California rye from Spirit Works, a 10-year-old New York rye from New York Distilling Company,
Yep.
and a 9.99-year-old Westland peated single malt that we bottled the day before its 10th birthday, because Westland has never released their own 10-year-old whiskey, and we bought this whiskey a number of years ago. We continued to age it ourselves, and we felt like it wasn't fair to take away the chance for them to do the first Westland 10-year-old. So we bottled it the day before, which I think was on a Sunday. So we came into the tasting room to do that.
That's nice.
And it says right on the front label, 9.99 years old. And I think that's the fun of being an independent bottler, is playing around the edges and doing things that are a little different.
Yeah, but it's also I like the fact that you're giving reverence to where you're getting the product from too.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's really cool. So we are getting limited amounts of those. So keep an eye out for them because there won't be a lot of them. Or a whole card if you really want some. That one of those sounded really cool for a whole card. And guess what? That's the first one we go to. And want to thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. We're going to start hearing a lot more about Lost Lantern. You heard it here first. If this is the first touch you've had with Adam, and next time we'll bring Nora in too, and we'll have that going on too. I want to thank everybody for listening to us on Facebook. Whenever you Cousin Vinny turns this into a podcast, just look for It's the Liquor Talk, and we get your podcasts such as Spotify. Guys should have been here tonight if you weren't, because it was really cool. Thanks, everybody.